Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a special meeting of the El Centro City Council for Wednesday, July the 31st, 2024. Madam Clerk. Gosh. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Carter,
Present.
Councilmember Oliva,
Present.
Councilmember Garcia,
Present.
Interim Mayor Pro Tem Cardenas Singh,
Present.
Mayor Marroquin.
Present. Councilmember Garcia, can you please lead us in the flag salute?
Hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Councilmember Carter, can you please give us an invocation?
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you just saying, we ask you to bless the people as vacation comes to an end and people prepared for the school year for their kids. We're asking for you just to put your hands on the entire family, Lord, and bless this rest of these summer months. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And please remain
standing. At this moment, I would like to ask for a moment of silence to pay respects to Councilmember Oliva's father, who died unexpectedly yesterday. And so please bow your heads for a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. Alrighty, so at this time, we will be going into public comments. And this is a public meeting. If there is an item on the agenda on which you wish to be heard, you are asked to complete a blue speaker slip and submit it to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council are not required to identify themselves. However, this information assists the mayor by ensuring that all persons wishing to address the council are recognized and also assists the city clerk in preparing the city council meeting minutes. When the item is announced and your name is called by the mayor, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. Unless the mayor extends the time, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. If you wish to address the council concerning any other matter not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment portion of the agenda. However, you may not show a visual presentation without review of that material. If you do so, you will be considered out of order. Madam City Clerk, at this time, do we have any requests for public comment?
We have none, Mayor.
None? Thank you. Either in person or virtually?
Both. None.
Okay, all righty. Okay, colleagues, and now we move on to the consent agenda. And so, Madam City Clerk, are we setting up the vote?
Trying to set it
Oh,
up.
okay.
Could we have a voice roll call, please? I'm sorry, it's not
Okay.
working.
All righty.
Councilmember Carter,
Yes.
Councilmember Oliva,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Interim Mayor Pro Tem Cardenas Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Marroquin.
Yes.
And we need a motion and a second.
So may I have, I know we went out
I'll
of
make the
order, didn't
motion.
we? So
Second.
Councilmember Oliva made the motion and Councilmember Garcia second.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so we move on to new business. And at this time, we will have a presentation by Mr. Andy Heath. He is a financial consultant, and he will present the annual fiscal year 2025 budget amendments to the community. Hello, Mr. Heath, thank you.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Andy Keith, financial consultant to the city. What I'd like to do for you today is kind of go over what I've been doing for the last couple of months for the city. Looking at your budget, looking at your general fund. They're working? Okay. Looking at pretty much all things fiscal related to the city of El Centro, and how you might be able to create better efficiencies in your finance realm, in your finance department, looking at your city's policies, looking at the way your city's budget is set up, and more importantly, looking at making that budget so it's sustainable well into the future, where you can operate as a going concern well into the future. What I'll be doing today is going through just an overview of the budget development process, and we're calling this the revised budget. So you may recall that just about a month ago, you did adopt a general fund budget. You adopted a citywide budget, actually. And I have taken the opportunity to really go through and comb through several funds, your major operating funds in the city, which are comprised of the general fund, the Measure P fund, and the city's two main enterprise funds, the water and the wastewater fund. And really looked at those funds to make sure that the information that was being presented in the budget was transparent, and making it more transparent, and then articulating exactly what fund balances are, what they will be, assuming the budget comes to full fruition as revised, and how they will portray into the future from a fiscal standpoint. So I will be going through a general fund overview and a revised budget for the general fund. I will be going through the general fund forecast. This forecast was presented a couple of weeks ago to the city's ad hoc finance committee meeting. Was well received. But what this forecast does is it really lays out what the sustainability of the general fund looks like into the future. And more importantly, it transparently tells you why and what's going on within your city's general fund. So we'll go through that. Then we'll look at the city's two enterprise funds, water and wastewater. The Measure P fund will be discussed because there's a lot of money that comes into Measure P, and you use Measure P for a lot of things. So we'll go through what that looks like. And then we'll answer any questions and go over some next steps for preparation of the balance of the budget, because your city has a lot more than the four funds that we're going to be discussing tonight. Got a lot of little funds as well. So looking at the budget development process, again, we are focusing on the four major operating funds in the city: Measure P, the general fund, water and wastewater. We did prepare a forecast for the city's general fund, where we looked at all the accounts in the general fund, not just an array of accounts, but every account in the general fund, both from a revenue and an expenditure perspective. Went through the whole structure of the general ledger to really understand that, so that we could put that forecast together correctly. We presented the forecast, as I mentioned, to the ad hoc finance committee meeting on July 17th. We reviewed the 23-24 fiscal activity to date. So one of the really good determinants that is used for the coming year's budget, which is now the current year's budget, is looking at what has transpired in the previous year. So we've actually gone through the 23-24 information and updated all that and used that as a kind of a benchmark for what is to come and what is being forecasted for 24-25 and into the future. And then today we are presenting this major fund information to your city council for ultimate potential adoption. This is your city's general fund budget. So keep in mind that this is a revised budget. So I won't be going through the budget that you saw last month. What I am doing is I'm going through the budget for the general fund that's been prepared as a result of the forecast that's been put together, which again looks at every single line item account and for both revenues and expenditures in the general fund. For 23-24, we're estimating, this is the year just finished last month, we're estimating about 36.2 million in revenue and about 35.5 million in expenditures. So we're looking at about a $700,000 surplus that ultimately will be added back to the general fund for last year. That is a pretty good number. Again, this is based on estimates. The city really can't close the books out for 23-24 until after August because you do have a 60-day accrual period, which you look at both revenues and expenditures and make sure you're truing up those revenues and expenditures into the correct fiscal year. So that does take 2 months, but anticipating what is likely to transpire based on prior year information, we can anticipate that the city will put about $700,000 back into general fund balance at the end of fiscal 23-24. Moving into fiscal 24-25, you can see that about 38.7 million in revenue, just under 38.6 million in expenditures. That means that the anticipated surplus to reserves for the revised budget for 24-25, the budget that you have adopted a month ago, is now $150,000. So you have about $150,000 surplus. Essentially, when you're looking at a $38 million general fund budget, when you come up with $150,000 surplus, you essentially have a balanced budget, okay? So that's one way I would definitely term this. That forecasted amount, again, is based on a conservative approach to preparing the budget. So we're trying not to really overestimate revenues, and we're trying to make sure we account for all the expenditures that are anticipated to be incurred in the budget. We're going to go through a couple of things because, again, as I mentioned, this budget is prepared. This revised budget is prepared based on a model that was put together, a forecast that was put together for your city. So there's a lot of assumptions that go into that. So we're going to briefly go through those so you can understand how that $150,000 is being derived. We do have fully loaded salaries that are built into the general fund budget, as they are for all budgets, all fund budgets. And then there is an implied amount for salary savings, and we'll go through what that looks like as well. And then we've also updated workers' comp rates, which is a significant change in the budget, where in the general fund alone, that is saving about $200,000 by truing up what the workers' comp rate should be so that workers' comp is not overfunded annually like it has been for the last several years in the city. Looking at just general fund key revenues, 3% increase in property taxes. It's been a little bit more than that in the past. We can anticipate that that's likely to continue. I'm not seeing any real dips in property tax statewide for many of the other cities that I work with. Slightly higher sales tax revenues are based on the current state of the economy. Centro is in a unique position where it's geographically isolated, and a lot of the sales tax that you generate here doesn't leave. And it's going to continue to be spent here. So it's safe to say that because of inflation and because of the higher cost of things that you ultimately pay sales tax on, that your sales tax will likely go up a little bit as well. 3% increase in transient occupancy tax, just again based on inflation. As room rates go up, your transient occupancy tax will go up as well. Flat year-over-year development and recreation related fees charges. So really hard to predict unless you have a very good plan that articulates exactly what your development cycles are going to be well into the future. It's hard to predict exactly what's going to transpire with development and recreation fees for that matter from year to year. So one thing that I typically do for cities that have a robust development program and a robust parks and recreation program like yours does is keep those fees flat and just watch over time. And if the fees end up going up, then again, you're going to see that in the future in the forecast, and it'll be built in. And then there is built in, this is something that your council did adopt with the last budget for 24-25, a $2.1 million transfer in from the Measure P fund. So that means the Measure P fund is actually moving money into the general fund for $2.1 million to cover the cost for police and fire non-personnel related costs. So that would be materials, supplies, fuel, the things that police and fire need to support themselves other than staff. So all of those costs are covered by Measure P for the current year, for 24-25. More importantly, in the forecast into the future as well. Looking at some general fund expenditures and some of the key items there. Again, I did mention that we have full funding for all positions in the general fund for the entirety of the year, with the exception of a vacancy savings credit that is built into the general fund. So what I've done is I've looked at all the vacant positions in the general fund and the value of those vacant positions by which departments they're in. So we have police and fire, which are looked at separately. Then we also have all the other departments, the miscellaneous employees that are looked at separately. I took the value of the vacant positions in those departments, and I have taken 50% of that value, which ironically is about $1.7 million worth of vacancy savings. So that means the value of your vacant positions today in your general fund is about $3.4 million when you add it all up. I've taken half of that and built it in as a credit to the appropriate areas, police, fire, and miscellaneous to the budget. So your staff budget in the general fund, although it's funded at the whole level, all positions are funded for the entirety of the year. There's an assumption that you will have about 50% vacancy savings of your existing vacant positions that are currently on the books. I only did this because what I have seen in the past, when I looked at the last couple of years in putting the forecast together, you always look at the past. You have had significant amounts of vacancy savings compared to the positions that you have authorized in your city for filling. So it's probably highly unlikely that you're going to fill all those positions right away. And it's probably more likely that you will fill some of them, but more importantly, a lot of those positions will be vacant. So very comfortable with the amount that we're building in for vacancy savings for the coming year. And then in the future, we also assume that this 50% vacancy savings exists. So one thing we will need to look at in the future is what is the right level of the staffing that's required to deliver the service level that your city council and the public is expecting needs to be delivered by the city. And what does that look like from a staffing perspective? And more importantly, what's it look like from a cost perspective? So there's just a lot of fluctuation right now when I look at all the staff in previous years. There's an $881,000 increase for the general fund portion of the CalPERS unfunded liability amortization cost that's built in. So that number is built in. And this is just a number that ebbs and flows consistent with where CalPERS ends up each year in their investment portfolio. I'm happy to report for the first time in 3 years that CalPERS did meet its investment objective for fiscal 23-24, at least on a preliminary basis, where their investment pool earned, I think, 9.3% compared to the 6.8% that is their discount rate. So earning 2.5% more is a very good thing. So you're likely to see that cost come down or maybe flatten out a little bit, but we won't see that for a couple of years because it takes a couple of years for those things to mold into the actuarial studies for CalPERS. We have a reduction in workers' comp. I mentioned that. We reduced it from 11% to 9%, and this results in about $200,000 savings to the general fund. You do have an increase in liability and property insurance for $369,000. A good portion of these insurance costs are, however, part of your cost allocation plan, where the water and sewer funds participate in that cost as well. So some of that cost is actually being transferred out of the general fund. You do have an increase in the cost transferred out to the water and sewer fund, $408,000. And that only is going up because, remember, this is a fully loaded budget that we're talking about. And so when you look at a fully loaded budget, you want to make sure you account for whatever costs need to be transferred out as fully loaded costs. Ultimately, to the extent the city incurs less costs than are in the budget, like for salaries and such, you won't see commensurate cost transfer out that is higher. That will also come down. So water and sewer will only get their share of the actual costs associated with the way the city allocates those costs. Increase in energy costs, so the streetlight program, $80,000 there. That's pretty consistent with what I'm seeing across the state. And the nominal increases to base budgets, and these are just the ongoing budgets that are needed by the departments, required due to inflation. So certain things have been increased, material supplies, et cetera, where necessary to account for the inflation that the state has seen in recent past. Okay, I'm going to move into the forecast now. And some of this I've kind of already hit on in going through the revenues and expenditures, but this is where we'll all start to play into exactly what your general fund looks like and what we're doing with the general fund. So the purpose of putting a forecast together, and keep in mind that we're looking at 2 prior years, the current year, various iterations of the current year, given different policy stances, and then portraying those policy stances into the future in a forecast for 5 additional years. So that's what you're seeing here. The goal is to prepare a baseline forecast where what a baseline means is that we're trying to strip out all of the one-time revenues and expenditures from the budget and only focus on the ongoing revenues that are needed to provide an ongoing level of service that your council and the public desires. So that's the goal. Ultimately, some one-time expenditures and or revenues last a couple of years, so that's built in. But once they drop off, they're not assumed to continue moving forward. Looking at a multi-year horizon, I mentioned that this will be 5 years into the future. There are significant cost drivers that are built into this forecast that are demanding an increasing share of discretionary revenues. And those things reflect employment costs. So every time you give a CPI increase to your employees, COLA, you have CalPERS costs, which continue to go up. You have health benefit costs, which continue to go up. So all those costs are built in at some level in an assumption to increase. You have ongoing capital and outlay needs. This year, the capital and outlay needs typically would be funded by the general fund or part of that $2.1 million Measure B transfer. So those are built in. You have insurance costs that continue to rise. We went over that, energy costs, et cetera. We have removed the one-time revenues and expenditures where we know about them. And then we looked at existing budget methodologies and built in certain, ultimately, what will be policy considerations as we move forward. So we've talked about the vacancy savings. So one of the things that's built into the revised budget is this vacancy savings amount of 50% of the existing cost of the vacant positions. Cost allocation, I mentioned earlier that cost allocation is based on the fully loaded budget. But ultimately, at the end of the day, only the true amount that needs to be transferred out to the water and sewer fund with the cost allocation methodology the city currently has, which isn't going to change, will be done. Workers' compensation and health internal service funds. So these funds right now are overfunded because they have been overfunded in the past several years. So those amounts have been right-sized, specifically the workers' comp amount, where we looked at what it would take to make sure that we have just the amount of the premium that we need to pay for workers' comp from all the funds, and that's how we're able to reduce it from 11 to 9%. And then your vehicle funding, I haven't really looked at that one yet. You have a special internal service fund for vehicle funding as well, where all of your funds participate and pay an amount into a vehicle fund, which then ultimately you buy vehicles from. Because of the number of vehicles you actually buy, and because of the number of vehicles that are appropriated directly in the funds, I'm probably going to recommend that vehicle ISF, Internal Service Fund, be eliminated, and that we just continue to budget the majority of the capital, especially for outlay for vehicles and things, right into the funds, like you pretty much currently do for 75% of the things that you buy. And then ultimately what this does is it creates future sustainability, providing a current and defined level of service under an array of assumptions. So there's all kinds of assumptions built into this budget. Every revenue line has an assumption. Every expenditure type has an assumption. Assumptions where we know what the costs are likely to be. If we have an actuarial study like from CalPERS, we're building that in. So all of that is taken into account in this forecast. The forecast development and some of the assumptions. So again, one of the first things that I did was really reconciled all of your staff. So I was able to receive from staff your complete array of personnel, whether or not that position was filled or vacant, and what the cost of that position was, the fully loaded cost. So all of that was reconciled. So those costs are good. We looked at updated fiscal information from your last audit that was completed, which was in fiscal 21-22. So I used that audit as kind of a baseline and actually built in actual data that is in your general ledger from fiscal 21-22 to reconcile all that. So that is good, and that does reconcile. Then we looked at fiscal 22-23, and the year just finished, 23-24, and took estimates for those years where appropriate. 22-23 is probably pretty close to being very, very accurate. And 23-24, again, we had to assume that certain things were going to accrue both on the revenue side and the expenditure side, but we're pretty close on that. And then we looked at the 24-25 city manager's recommended budget that came and ultimately was adopted. And that is what is now enabling us to put together the revised budget. Talked about positions, the $1.7 million in vacancy savings, fund balances that are in the general fund. So keep in mind that this forecast is only for the general fund and your general fund in your audit. So when you look at your city's financial statements and you see the word general fund in your basic financial statements, there's actually 3 funds that roll into that general fund. There's a general fund. Your Measure P fund is part of your general fund in your audit. and also your OPEB fund, your $4 million that you have set aside, not OPEB, your CalPERS Retirement Trust Fund 602, I think it is. So all of that is in that general fund, okay? But I'm only looking at the general fund component. The numbers you're going to see are going to be less than the numbers in the audit because it's just looking at the general fund. CalPERS costs, both actual and estimated, are taken from the most recent actuarial reports that were available, which is about a year ago. So I expect those reports to come out anytime now, no later than the month of August, to be updated. And once we get those new numbers from CalPERS, we're going to update the forecast to account for them. General fund transfers out only include $95,000 to your special events fund. So this is the only fund that's receiving funding from the general fund. And then we did make adjustments to the cost allocation of workers' compensation funding, as I mentioned. These are just some of the assumptions. I won't belabor on this slide too much, but these are just the different areas that we looked at in terms and basically are increasing over each year in the forecast over the 5 years. The area I will focus on is where you have annual transfers in. So these are monies that are coming into the general fund from other funds for a specific purpose. Those funds include the gas tax fund, which is funding just over $1.2 million into the general fund for your street program. LTA administration, Buena Vista and latest UANCH LLD, Town Center Fund. Most of those are administrative related components to cover the admin costs for staff that are incurred in the general fund, but support the activities in those other funds. And then you can see you also have the $2.2 million transfer from Measure P that's actually built in as well. This is what your forecast looks like long term. So when you take all of that into account, you parlay it into the future, and keeping in mind that there are no staff cost increases other than cost for benefits, the assumed cost for benefits, and the increases to that, cost for workers' comp, et cetera. There are no labor increases built in after fiscal 24-25. Okay, so 25-26 doesn't have anything built in. And I want to say that the cost of each 1% that you give citywide, I believe, is $158,000 or $186,000. I think it's $158,000. Don't have that written down. But that would ultimately be added to the bottom line to each one of those years to the extent you gave a 1% increase to employees. Nonetheless, when you look at this from a conservative perspective and you're gauging the sustainability of the city into the future, you've got balanced budgets moving forward. Although you're not including the cost for staff, keep in mind that this is built conservatively, okay? And also keep in mind that there are many more policy considerations that as we go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, and as we go through the way the city is preparing its budget and fiscal policies, implementing its fiscal policies, there's going to be more to come, okay? So I can tell the city council that probably, when we come back in 6 weeks with the balance of the budget, we're going to have an update to this because there's going to be things that are found that ultimately will save the general fund more money from my perspective. I'm not finding anything that's costing the general fund more money. I'm finding things that are saving the general fund money. Okay? But looking at this from a very conservative perspective, looking at it for the current year, you have essentially a balanced budget, $150,000 surplus. Next year it goes to 281, then it goes to 207, 246. You have a slight deficit in 28-29, and then goes back up to 126. When you get out that far, it becomes a lot less predictable, if you will, than looking at the current year. But nonetheless, good balanced budgets moving forward. And one of the things that's built into this also, I don't think I have the slide in this presentation, is the increase in CalPERS costs. So your CalPERS costs are going to go up over $1 million over the next 5 years. That's built into this. So assuming CalPERS does what it did last year and makes 9.3% year after year into the future, then that $1 million will be mitigated. It will come down and these will go up. Okay, so your surpluses will go up. But this is definitely better than what I have seen in your budget in the past. This is your general fund balance. So these are the amounts in the general fund balance. And keep in mind your expenditure base in the general fund is about $38 million. And you've got $24 million set aside in reserves. So 24 million out of 38 is significant, between 60 and 70%. And that is definitely a good amount to have in reserves. It's very prudent for a city your size. And I think that the city council has done a good job making sure it has adequate reserves set aside for things that might come up, and believe me, they do come up. These are just some of the key observations that I took away from the forecast in the general fund. So again, budgets are essentially balanced, given the updated assumptions, which are conservative, and some policy considerations. Personnel costs required to deliver a suppressed level, not suppressed, not from a different place. Personnel costs required to deliver the level of service is actually 73 to 74% of all of your costs. So that is a little bit high. So the cost of your personnel in your general fund is about 3/4 of your general fund total costs. General fund investment in capital and public safety non-personnel costs is funded by Measure P. So that's 2.2 million bucks. General fund portion of annual CalPERS UAL, it's expected to increase by approximately 1.8 million over the next 5 years. So that has all been built in to the numbers that you saw on that slide. So hopefully if CalPERS continues to make more money, those numbers will go up even more, which would be good. The fully loaded costs of providing 1% of salary to all employees, there it is, I do have it, in 25-26 is about $181,000. So that is the amount that if, let's just say hypothetically, the city was able to provide 3% to every employee citywide starting July 1st, 2025. That would cost you 181 times 3, so about $543,000. On an ongoing basis, that would be added to each one of those years in a cost. Okay, I'm going to move now to the water fund and go through these funds pretty quickly. So this is the first of 2 enterprise funds that have been put together. So the water fund, the revised budget, about $9.36 million in revenue, $11.2 million in expenditures. Revenues are essentially unchanged from 23-24, not a whole lot of change there. Forecasted lower late fees and lower capacity fees. It accounts for fully loaded staff costs, similar to the general fund. You have an increase in the CalPERS UAL cost of about $50,000. So you saw the $800,000 increase on the general fund side. On the water fund, it's going up by $50,000. The increase in the overhead cost allocation is $209,000. But again, this amount will only reflect ultimately at the end of the year what the true amount needed to be transferred is for the cost allocation. And then the water fund capital budget is $1.5 million. I have a slide for that. Projected reserves, assuming all that comes to fruition. So assuming you bring in 9.3 million in revenue and you spend 11.2 million and undertake your entire capital plan that's currently budgeted in the water fund, at the end of the day on June 30th, 2025, a year from now, you will have 26.8 million in working capital in your water fund. And that's made up of 2.6 million in capacity fees. Stabilization fees make up 1.3, debt service reserve of 2.1, and then the balance, which is unobligated, $20.8 million. So good reserves in your water fund. This is the capital for the water fund. So this is just the different things that have been recommended and have already been approved as part of the original budget for the water fund. So just pointing out some of the big things: public works restrooms, you got $350,000 there. Metter, $200,000. Parking lot shades, $100,000. Shades for the filter, $150,000. So a lot of different things going on in the water fund. $1.5 million. All right, moving on to the city's other enterprise fund, main enterprise fund, the city's wastewater fund. The revised budget, just under 11 million at 10.89 million in revenue, and just over 19 million, 19.2 million in expenditures. You can see that expenditures far outweigh the revenues, and that is because you have a significant amount of capital that is built in to the wastewater fund, about just under $10 million actually. Revenues like the water fund are essentially unchanged, have some lower interest because assuming that you spend all that money on capital, you're not going to have a lot of cash, or you won't have as much cash in the fund. So we lowered the interest in that fund by the end of the year, and then lower capacity fees. It does account for fully loaded staff costs, and the CalPERS UAL cost also goes up by $50,000 in the water fund. Overhead, $199,000 more. And then assuming again, you undertake that entire capital budget that includes $10 million in the $19 million total expenditures, you'll have just under $20 million remaining in the wastewater fund at the end of the day. 2.6 million of which is related for capacity fees, 3.6 million stabilization, and 13.6 in unobligated working capital. This is the water fund and what the water fund capital looks like. So you can see the Southern Pump Station, which I think you're going to hear about in just a little bit. Has $4.85 million built into it. Temporary bypass design and installation, 1.15 million there, 600,000 each for the UV disinfection system and installation, the dewatering press, $500,000 for sewer linings. So a lot going on in your wastewater fund. So this is what you want to see, under $10 million. Moving on to the Measure P fund. So the updated Measure P fund, fiscal 24-25 revised budget accounts for just under $8 million in revenue, 7.96. And again, $20 million in expenditures, given that the capital budget in the Measure P fund is $13 million. So very large capital budget in the Measure P fund. We have a 1.5% increase in sales tax projected, keeping in mind that Measure P is a 0.5% TUT, transactions and use tax, that the city does receive for an array of purposes. So that is projected to increase about 1.5%. We have an increase in debt service costs that is being built in for the police station debt. So last year, 23-24, you paid a portion of that because it was the first year you paid that debt. Now we're truing all that up. So an additional $596,000, and that will be ongoing, has been built in. You have funding for police and fire non-personnel costs in the general fund, and that's your $2.13 million. And then the capital budget is $13 million. So assuming you bring in the just under $8 million in Measure P, and assuming you spend the $19.3 million in Measure P, and all that capital, you'll still have about $7.6 million in Measure P at the end of next year. Lots of capital in Measure P. So this is the array of capital that's going on there. The bigger projects include the police station building, $4 million coming from Measure P. Majority of that money is coming from bond proceeds from a different fund, but Measure P is providing $4 million. ADA improvements seems to be a theme in Measure P. There's several ADA improvements that are listed, whether it be to restrooms, whether it be to City Hall, community center, a lot of different ADA improvements. Valley Center Point demolition, $1.7 million there. A lot of park activity. Buena Vista Park, $1.3 million. Worthout Park, $153,000. Buckland Park alley repaving, $450,000. So there's different equipment in here. You've got some police and fire equipment in here. So a lot of good city things are being done with Measure P. When you look at this list, it's things that I typically see in the general fund, or you got to wait to do. So having Measure P in this city is definitely a very, very good thing. $13 million there. So these are next steps. So what are we going to do now? Ultimately, after tonight, what are we looking at for the future? So we do want to prepare updated and revised budgets for all the other city funds. So your city probably has, I'm going to guess another 80 funds or so. So we'll synopsize all those and we'll bring those back. But again, I do want to look at each one of those funds because there may be opportunities in those funds that ultimately enable the saving of something in the general fund or another fund moving into the future. We'll look at the general fund forecast and continue to update that. We will also prepare, like we did for the general fund, a forecast for Measure P. Given the amount of activity that goes in and out of Measure P, I think it's important that your city council, consistent with a 5-year plan that's been put together by the Public Works Director, really understand exactly what the ebbs and flows of Measure P looks like into the future, so you know what you might be able to do in addition to what's in there already. We'll review alternatives for overfunded workers' compensation and health insurance, internal service funds. So kind of already doing that, but that will come back. And then we'll look at, again, the motor vehicle internal service fund and look at budgeting directly into the home fund for a replacement schedule that if you have them, that's great. If you don't, then we'll put them together so that we can do that. That is all I have. I tried to do that succinctly, but clearly and transparently. And I will stop there and answer any questions you might have. And I know staff is here to address any specific budget questions your council might have as well.
Colleagues, any questions or comments from Mr. Heath?
I think for me, it would be comments, Madam Mayor, if it's all right with you.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Heath, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for putting together our fiscal ad hoc committee. When we talked about modernization in all of the departments, we knew that it was very important to take a look at our fiscal department as well. And so I'm happy to see that, one, there is a surplus, two, that we are forecasting and that we're able to really see where the city stands in a snapshot. That really allows us to see, one, where we are with our spending, and two, as we align with our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, it really allows us to make a very informative information based on the data points that you shared with us. I do also, if I can, Madam City Clerk, if we can go back to slide number 18, which is Measure P. And I think this really needs to be highlighted because as we have implemented the sales tax, it's, slide 18.
Which one was it?
That's the Measure P where it outlines all the, wonderful.
Right here.
One more, the one that has the breakdown itemized. Thank you.
There we go.
I think this is really important. So for anyone that's listening in regards to our Measure P, this really gives an opportunity to see where the investment has been made in regards to the additional the 0.5% sales tax. And you can see that it all comes back to improving, one, quality of life and amenities for our constituents. We also see that several other city councils are taking a look at the possibility of a sales tax increase, and I hope that they take this opportunity and share with their constituents as well so they could see the benefit of the reinvestment that takes back into our city. So I think this is really important. We do get asked, where does Measure P and how is that money being allocated? And this is very clear that it all is invested back into our community and to our residents. So I really appreciate that. I think if I were to say anything about this PowerPoint presentation is about the modernization that's taken place and the forward thinking to ensuring that we have the data and the information that we need to have at hand to make those decisions, not only for us as city council, but really for the department heads and our city managers. They begin to administer and take a look at the current growth and the potential and future growth for our city. So thank you so much. I thought it was, in the conversations that we've had, it was important to bring in an expert to really take a look at it from a bird's eye view and the expertise to be able to comb through our finances and our budget to give us up-to-date and current information. So I appreciate it.
Oliva, do you have any questions or comments from Mr. Heath?
Just a simple comment, and that is that just how important the work that you've done and the ability for folks that get to sit up here to be able to make informed decisions moving forward. And I just thought that the importance in and of itself is why I'm here today, as opposed to being somewhere else. And I just wanted to say thank you to you and to the staff, and to let you all know how important you all are to me. And that's exactly why I'm here and wanted to make the effort to be able to vote on this. So thank you.
Councilmember Carter, any questions or comments from Mr. Heath?
Just a brief comment. I would just like to say thank you. This is really outlined perfectly. it gives us a lot of knowledge and outreach on big decisions that are being made. And this outlook right here is amazing. So we just want to say thank you. Thank you for all of the hard work and dedication.
Member Garcia.
Thank you very much. This is a very comprehensive breakdown of what our budget is going to look like, not only now, but projected into the future. Reiterate what my colleague said, this is very important for our city, and it's very important to have the information in front of us so we can make those educated decisions as to what will better help the community. I really like the breakdown of the expenditures on capital for Measure P. I am concerned with the $2.1 million input from Measure P to the general fund. And what I'd like to see, assuming that we will be having a further revised budget forecast and overview that you'll be providing, I would like a breakdown of those 2.1 million as to specifically where it will be going. That will allow me to have a better understanding, as well as my colleagues, of exactly what the purpose of that 2.1 million is and how it is being framed under the goal of Measure P ultimately. So that's very important to me, and that's something I'd like to see when we come back. But as far as what we have so far, it's just it's a lot of good information that is allowing us to move forward in this complicated process of formulating our budget and forecast for the future of the betterment of the city. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Heath, I'm just really impressed with the work and the breakdown that you provided for us. It's been an eye-opening experience. You know, I maintain the finances for a small business. And so as I was following along, I was just amazed at, you know, all of the things that you took into consideration when you were breaking down each fund, and what you took into consideration when you did our 5-year forecast. You know, because, you know, there's a lot of little factors that went into play that then amounted to the surplus that we have today. And so it's been, you know, I look forward to, you know, the continued work that you will provide for us, and so that we then have a much clearer picture of where we are and where we're going. So thank you, Mr. Heath. We really appreciate all of the hard work and the dedication that you've really put into this, and for making this very transparent and very easy to follow. So thank you. Okay, so that motion was moved by Councilmember Oliva, seconded by Councilmember Cardenas Singh. Council colleagues, please vote. And so we now have, adopted resolution number 24-63, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Centro, California, adopting a revised annual budget for selected funds for fiscal year 2024-2025. Thank you, Mr. Heath.
Great, thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Okay. And so the next item on the agenda is an update and any necessary action regarding ARPA funding related to the Public Works Department activities. And so we have our Public Work Director and City Engineer, Mr. Abraham Campos.
All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Today's a related theme, budget, and looking at the future modernization. I like that theme. What we have before us right now is an update to ARPA funding as it relates to public works projects and projects that were assigned to our department. Just some ideas and pictures of those projects. One of the big projects, and I'll go through a list just coming up, but we completed a raw water electrical panel upgrade at the water plant. We completed a gas chlorine conversion. Pictures on the top, on the tanks, or the gas tanks that were eliminated, in the bottom are containers of liquid chlorine, which is much safer, and equipment that was associated with it as well. So some of the ARPA funds and where we're investing into the community for the future and making things safer. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to redistribute the existing ARPA funding to account for the actual expenditures, and also we want to from that actual expenditures, create a budget for a water and sewer master plan update and a rate study project. This is for our water and wastewater funds. Thankfully, you're all experts on what that is right now, so this will make a lot of sense to you. The ARPA projects, they enhance system reliability, expand capacity, and the idea here is to strengthen the appeal for commercial and residential development. So we're making a strategic investment into the future right now with these ARPA funding. In addition, by using ARPA funds to fund some of these water and sewer projects, we're saving or reducing the strain on the water and enterprise funds, which means when we do this water and wastewater study, it will help decrease the impact or reduce the impact or eliminate an impact on water and sewer rate increases. So it's an investment that we're doing today. This is a summary of the projects that were approved under the ARPA for public works. Some of them were simple, like a cleaning trailer, which was completed at $30,000, and there was a cost savings because we only spent $10,000, so it's about $20,000 cost savings, and so forth goes down the list. Portable pressure washers at $5,000. We spent some of that. We've spent on temp staff for streets and parks, which have assisted in our alley cleanups, helping our streets department and our code enforcement be active and responsive. As I mentioned, we have completed the gas fluorine conversion. There was a slight savings at that project. We completed our raw water structure electric upgrades, which I just showed you the pictures as well. There was some savings in that project as well. Now, going back to the project that we just discussed right now, the Southern Pump Station. As you know, we've in the budget currently has in ARPA funding allocated $5 million. What we're proposing is to increase that to 5.255 million as presented here in the slide. We're reducing our current project on the stormwater improvements. That's the next project. What that project is a trash capture state requirement for stormwater. So that's basically the trash going into your inlets. There's new mechanisms that need to be installed to reduce the amount of trash and debris that enters the stormwater system and that eventually makes it to the Salton Sea along the way, right? So that project, we completed the design. That's the $116,000 there. But I'm proposing we shift that cost over for the construction itself to Measure D, which is our streets LTA fund. And that way, it's a streets-related stormwater program, and that will create a savings in this ARPA funds. With those savings altogether, I'm proposing we add a line item for a water and sewer master plan in the amount of $900,000. Altogether, you can see the bottom, the before approved amount and the request proposed amount is the same amount. By looking at the different and shifting funding around, make sure that we are able to cover this very important water and sewer master plan, which is part of our strategic plan, our 5-year plan, and we need to be able to get a clear picture of where we're at on water and wastewater and move as we move forward. So with that, I'm just looking for your support to approve this project funding, revised ARPA funding list for projects. Any questions?
Screen disappeared. Okay, Mr. Campos. So I guess there were no questions. My colleagues voted. And so, and we will then be, that's approved 5-0.
Keep the
Okay,
PowerPoint open.
for that. And I know that you have a couple of other items on the agenda. So we will move on to item number 6, discussion and any necessary action regarding the approval of an agreement with DUDEC for services related to the water and sewer master plan and cost of service rate study.
Fantastic. Thank you again for this item. Again, now that we have the budget in keeping with the theme here of modernizing, we are looking at overdue update to our water and sewer master plan. The last master plan was developed around 2008 when we were seeing a huge housing boom and just before the crash. So it had certain assumptions. We need to update the master plan to reflect current conditions. And so what is this? What is a sewer master plan? And it's a document that outlines the current state, future needs, and strategies for managing the city's treatment, supply, and collection of water and wastewater in our city. So basically creates that CIP that was just discussed, the capital improvement program. What will it take for the city to grow down the line? It ties together with planning. Where do we see the city growing? Where do we see housing coming? Where do we see businesses? What types of improvements do we need? It also considers existing operational expenses and tries to develop a plan to allow for the city's growth while keeping the existing infrastructure functioning and complying with permit requirements. Once we have that master plan, we want to do a water rate study, not the other way around. We want to have good data to move forward on the water and sewer rate study. Now, knowing what the needs of the city will be for the coming future, we will have a finance side of a consultant look at this. As somebody that's an expert similar to Mr. Heath here, that develops Prop 218 compliant rate studies. And that reminds me, we do have Dudek on the line, which is a proposed consultant for this project. And I believe Greg Rippinger is if there's any specific questions on the program. So this is why we're doing both and together in a package. Once we know where the city is going, we can know how our rates or structure is and if it needs any revising. A master plan process is a very extensive project. For us, it's a water and a sewer side. We're not like Coachella or other areas where they hire an outside district for water or sewer service. Basically, the city pays a fee to somebody else for water and sewer. We adhere to the city. We're full service. We have our own water plant, our own wastewater plant, our own collection system, our own distribution system, and so forth. So that's why we bill our citizens for that recouping. And then enterprise fund is basically a business. We operate based on the revenue we get. That's it. It does not tie into the general fund. For the water, in terms of the master plan, there's regulatory policy reviews. We're in water distribution system condition assessments that will be done to see what our lines are and any needs to update them. Condition assessments that both our system and the water plant. From there, they develop a water capital improvement program, which is a 5-year list of projects and so forth. So which ones are very critical right now, which ones can wait, which ones are growth related. Based on that, we have our master plan report, and from there it transitions into a rate study and how much will it cost us to get there and at what level of schedules. When do we need to start charging? Is it right now, later? Are we good? How are our finances looking? Very similar on the sewer side, so I won't bore you with that. The big item on this one is how do we pay for it? Because a very comprehensive document. We perform quite an effort on our request for proposals, and we got a very good consultant making a submittal. So it was an open, transparent project. It was advertised. We did a request for proposal. We got a consultant on board, Dudek, who is on the line, and we have a good program here and a good proposal on how to get there. Again, funding, ARPA has just on the private item, just approved, thankfully, because there's 900,000. Otherwise, this slide would make no sense. Then wastewater enterprise fund, we're proposing to utilize 170,000 out of that. And then the water enterprise fund, 169,000, basically 50-50 on the water and wastewater, the difference by ARPA, which covers the full amount for the project. So with that, do you have any questions on this project? And if not, I would ask your consideration to approve a contract with Dudek for this amount.
I would like to make a comment. Just a comment, Mr. Campos. You know, that has been the theme that we have here with our council. We have been very strategic about making sure that we're right-sizing and modernizing every department. And we understand the importance of making sure that we're prepared for the future. And so when I take a look at this, it is doing that. It is making sure that we have everything in place and that we're prepared and that it's all based on data and information that's relevant and current. That's really the driving force on how we spend our dollars. So I commend you. I think it goes along with our theme of one, developing the baseline, modernizing what we have in place, and then from there, forecasting for the future. So it aligns exactly with what we have decided as a council.
Yes. Oliva, any questions or comments from Mr. Camposo? No. And you know, going along those lines with Councilmember Cardenas saying, you know, the growth that is going to happen to not just to the south, but anticipating to the north as well. You know, it's really important that we, you know, like you said, think ahead and be prepared, you know, because we've got to be proactive and not reactive, you know, to all of the needs that the city has. And so, this would also be welcoming to developers and to new commercial businesses in the county, but, excuse me, in the city. But we've also got to think about, the residential development that we really need in the city. And so, kudos to you and to all of your team for, anticipating all of this and being proactive at this moment. So thank you, Mr. Campos. So this item was moved by Councilmember Carter, seconded by Councilmember Oliva. And so, Mr. Campos, that passes 5-0. So we now approve resolution number 24-64, resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro approving a consulting agreement with Dudek for design services relating to the water and sewer master plan and cost of service rate study. All righty, Mr. Campos. So now we go on to item number 7, discussion and any necessary action regarding the construction award for the Southern Pump Station project.
Good evening again. Keeping on that theme of growth and modernization, the Southern Pump Station project is a project that's been in our strategic plan for many, many years. It's been in our master plan since that 2008 master plan that I mentioned. It's gone through various iterations of advertising, design, redesign. We placed it once to bid once. The cost came astronomical. We divided the contract into smaller pieces. The cost still came high. But what is it? It's a project that serves a huge quadrant of the city and that is needed for future growth. You mentioned our residential growth. We actually have one of the local developers here has done fantastic work here for the city of El Centro, Mr. Marty Coyne, and with a project in this area that would benefit from this project. But this green area is basically from I-8 to McCave, from A Street to Dogwood, will benefit from this project. The project provides for growth. It increases the system reliability, and the idea is if we spend the funding here, we build that capacity, it attracts development. It's an expense that's no longer there, or that doesn't have to be financed. This is a project that's been planned in our system for capacity. It also has the added benefit of addressing odor concerns that we receive in the southwest and the northwest quadrants of the city. So some of that sewer will be diverted to this area. Not that it will create an odor in this location because it is a smaller distance of travel. So the idea is to help the citywide. So going back, this project, just to be clear, includes the red line and the orange line. So right now, the star is a location of the pump station. A lift station is it's a low point in the sewer system. Sewer flows by gravity. It gets deeper and deeper and deeper. When it gets too deep for operations, we install a pump station, basically brings it back up to a lower elevation, and this starts the gravity going down again. Sewer flows downhill, water flows downhill. So this lift station will cover all this area. Basically, what it means is that our gravity system, starting the master plans to start basically from McCabe, all of these yellow lines are future lines to be developed based on our current master plan. Eventually, we'll dump into this lift station. They start shallow, very shallow. At McCabe, they start getting deeper and deeper and deeper as they get to Dannenberg and Farnsworth, and then that's why we have the lift station, brings it back up, and it keeps on its merry way. So this project will consist of 2 phases, phase 1A and phase 1B. Based on the funding that I'm presenting today, we can only fund phase 1A, which includes the orange line and the red line. Phase 1B is needed. It's actually needed for the sewer main to function correctly. It's about another $4 million to get that phase 1B to operate. So with that, what I'm asking is to allow us to fund phase 1A. I'll go through the funding right now. And once we award the contract, we'll be value engineering with the contractor and the design team to see how we can modify the scope. We have some ideas already to create cost savings and get that 1B done. So I will need to come back to council with 1B. Thankfully, we sounded our presentation. There is funding there in the wastewater fund to finish this project, but I want to get as much value engineering first before I come ask for money. And I can't do that until the contract is awarded. So the cost for 1A is 11,794,968. We have construction management and soft cost design, TM testing, so forth. We're estimated 600,000 for a total project budget of 12,394,968. How we're going to fund it is shown there. We have ARPA funding, as mentioned, and was previously approved of the 5.2 million. Wastewater capacity fees of 5 million. Note that the current budget already includes 4.5, so it would be increased by 500,000 to make up that difference. And then we'd be asking to use some of that working capital from the wastewater enterprise fund in the amount of 2,100,000. Now, because I don't want to draw down too much of that wastewater enterprise fund, we took a serious look at our existing budget, what was approved in the fiscal year 25, and see which projects realistically will occur in 25 and which ones are better off in 26. And some of them is because right now we're in design, or we're about to start design. That process takes about a year. So this year we'll focus on the design of these projects, and the construction expense will be transferred out to a future year. For example, the temporary bypass installation is a sewer project. We're in the design. That's 1 million assumed construction this year. We don't believe that's actually going to materialize. So that's why it was taken out from this fiscal year, and so forth on the remainder projects. What that means is once you take into account the budget request here of 2.1 that I just mentioned in the previous slide, minus all the cost savings, we will be, this approval will request a 499,000 draw from the working capital, which was explained a few moments ago, is currently sitting around 20 million, or if I remember correctly. So it's completely within range of our fund balance and our working capital in the enterprise fund, and I'm recommending that we move forward in the spirit of growth for our city here. With that, I would request 2 items, 2 actions, or an action that approves both the funding as presented in this report, as well as award a resolution to Rove Engineering for the construction of the Southern Pump Station project. Any questions?
Colleagues, any questions or comments from Mr. Campos? So that motion was moved by Councilmember Martha Cardenas Singh and seconded by Councilmember Carter. And so that passes 5-0. So we now approve resolution number 24-65, resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro awarding the bid and authorizing the execution of a contract with Rove Engineering for the construction of the Southern Pump Station project. You mentioned another motion. Do we need to?
No, I think we're good.
Would that take care of both of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. All righty.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. And so at this moment, we have come to the end of our agenda. And council members, I know that we usually go through our tasks, our reports, but no, at this point,
Since it was a
we won't.
special
It's a
meeting.
special
we
meeting,
didn't
we
add
don't.
those on.
Okay, all righty. Okie dokie. So it is 5:08 p.m. and this special meeting is adjourned.